Welcome to the discussion. My guests today are Doug Casa, the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the Defense Intelligence Agency, Greg Smithberger, the Director of Capabilities and Chief Information Officer at the National Security Agency, and David Peed, the Vice President and General Manager of Federal for Equinix Government Solutions. Gentlemen, welcome to the discussion. Before we get started, let me set some context for our conversation today. The growth and acceptance of artificial intelligence and machine learning over the past few years across the government has been fascinating to watch. The Professional Services Council Foundation estimates contract obligations for AI-related investments grew by almost 75% to nearly $700 million between fiscal 2016 and 2018, and they expect it to grow further in 2019, reaching almost $1 billion. And that growth just isn't inside the Defense Department. Nearly every agency is discovering the potential benefits of applying advanced analytics and intelligence automation tools to their mission areas. The challenge for many agencies is how to prepare their infrastructures for these tools and how to add governance across their data. For many agencies, infrastructure modernization will happen at the same time and likely be in the form of a hybrid cloud setup. This adds another layer of complexity because data and applications will have to work across multiple clouds, both on and off premise. While hybrid cloud makes the most sense for many agencies, it also gives CIOs plenty to think about, including how best to balance performance and cost across the multiple cloud services, and of course, how best to secure data and applications. So how can agencies create that secure and flexible infrastructure to use AI, machine learning tools? Well, once again, that's where our panelists are going to come in. Greg, let me start with you on cloud. NSA has been a leader in cloud services in many ways. You guys are part of the intelligence community and the ICIght effort. I'm not sure you're calling it ICIght anymore, but it's the big effort, the big shared services effort. Let's talk about how the NSA's approach to cloud services.
Okay, so the National Security Agency's been on a cloud journey, actually multiple cloud journeys for about 15 years. When we first started down this road, there were no commercial cloud services available to the intelligence community in the classified world, so we built in-house cloud services, a large-scale utility compute complex, and also a very large-scale mission data fusion, data discovery, environment that we have been migrating all of our missions to over the last 15 years. And I'm happy to say that we have not only migrated all of the NSA core missions into that integrated mission fusion environment, NSA is also making that available as a shared service to the intelligence community, and we refer to that as the ICgov Cloud. So NSA is using a combination of government-owned and operated systems, commercial cloud services at the classified level, at the unclassified level, and we're experimenting with some new models for hardware as a service in addition to more full service commercial cloud services as we move forward. So we have very much of a mixed economy and happy to talk about all of that. Big data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning are kind of at the heart of everything we do in our mission cloud environment, but we're also using those capabilities for cybersecurity, looking at both internal and external threats, as well as helping us with service delivery. So happy to talk about all those issues.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. I love the term mixed economy. I may steal that, by the way, if that's okay. I'll give you credit, don't worry. But let me just ask you, before we get there, the ICgov Cloud, let's if you can put a definition, because you said it's a mix of internal and external, that is part of that shared service that you're offering. And what you guys have done is basically worked with some of the commercial providers to say, hey, if you can have a classified cloud, we can use part of it, but you also have your own internal one.
Correct. So the ICgov Cloud is a very large-scale data. It's a mission environment. It's so I usually refer to commercial cloud services like what Amazon is providing to the intelligence community through the C2S contract as a set of Lego blocks, right? You can essentially build anything you want out of them, but they don't inherently do any specific mission function. The ICgov Cloud is very different. It's a big, large-scale mission environment that does very specific things at great scale and great speed, using a lot of automation. And those things that it enables are data discovery, data fusion, real-time analysis and reporting, the machines accelerating what the humans can do, and the machines making the humans more efficient, and where possible, even creating totally automated outcomes that are consistent with the laws and policies that we have to operate in.
Okay. Let me move over to Doug from the DIA. You guys are also part of the intelligence community and of course, DoD. Give me a sense of how you guys are looking at your cloud strategy.
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a partnership across the IC and the DoD for how we approach this. And it's been a learning experience over time. And like every technology, our understanding and use of it has evolved over time as well. We think about it as a tool in our toolkit, so to speak, right? So we match up in a more traditional engineering sense the capabilities to the functions we're trying to perform. And cloud services is another tool that can help us execute a number of our functions. But when we think about it in terms of a framework, we really break it down into 3 areas. One is mission drivers of what's the location where the data and the services, the application, where are those around the world? We support more than 1 million users around the world and hundreds of sites. So location and the mission drivers really plays a factor in what we choose to do, whether it's on-premise or we go to a commercial cloud services or something like what NSA has with Gov Cloud, right? So all of that factors in. The second, and Greg mentioned this, is the technical feasibility, right? So there are some cases to where technically it makes sense, but we have to make our own investments in that, on that side as we choose to move to cloud services. We need to develop that technical bench strength as well to understand how to operate it. And then third is the cost feasibility, which is just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should, right? We have to balance the performance with the costs, the underlying costs that come along with it. So those are really the 3 elements of the framework that we use when we decide whether or not we're going to run our own or we'll outsource that to cloud services.
It's interesting that how the development over the years has changed in terms of what cloud is. You know, first, initially, I think cost was the big one, right? That was the driver back in 2011, 2012. And then now mission and technical feasibility are starting to play a bigger role. How do you balance those 3 needs? I mean, it's easy to always look at mission first, but if putting something in the cloud is going to cost right. more than it's worth keeping in-house, do you have a scoring system?
A lot of it comes down to the data dependencies. You know, traditionally, it's been very costly to move data across clouds. And now that's changing, right? The pendulum's swinging on that, and we're making advancements. But that was a big driver for us in the beginning of how we chose what avenue to take. A lot of our business systems we've moved into the cloud. A lot of our mission systems that we operate, because they're all around the world, because they have different security requirements, those we still run, many of those ourselves, just because the economies of scale isn't there yet. A lot of the cloud services that we have offered today are here within the United States, most of that on the East Coast. We support sites, as I mentioned, all over the world.
All right.
That's one of our biggest drivers.
I think that's a really important piece is can you get to the edge? We'll get probably to the edge in a little bit. Let me bring David into the discussion from Equinix. As you guys talk to your government customers, as you work with your government customers, some of the trends you guys are hearing about the move to the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen over the last 20, 25 years, there was the movement into the data center, outsourcing data centers, and then the consolidation of data centers. And then I think you've seen the same transition in cloud. So some of the early movers in the data center adoption, I think, was just a rush to say, hey, we've outsourced X amount of servers into commercial data centers. Similarly in the cloud, not implying it was just a rush, but I think there was a push to say how much you could actually push into the cloud. I think now agencies are stepping back and looking at the workloads on a workload by workload basis and how they're functioning. From us, every customer has some level of security concerns. Equinix platform for us, not only on the classified, unclassified side, which we have capabilities on both classified and unclassified data centers, but also from the physical security side, which all of our data centers in the continental United States are FISMA high. So, we're seeing a fast movement, lots of concern about security, whether it's physical or network security, and then also that the agencies seem to be being very cautious about what they're moving into the cloud and why, and I think making good decisions on why which applications move.
You bring up the security topic, and we're going to get there in a second, but before we do that, the multi-cloud, the hybrid approach, that's still obviously the the du jour of the day, right? The soup of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to continue to be. I think whether on the commercial side, the interconnection and the access to data is critical. And I think agencies look to be, many of them we seeing are re-architecting how they're connecting. And as Doug had said, I think for us, having 208 data centers globally, being able to store and compute data closer to where the source is really critical, and then also the security aspect of it. So yeah, we're seeing that, and a lot of focus on the location of the data and where the processing is happening.
Greg, let me ask you about the hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. The intelligence community started off with never a single cloud, though maybe you got a little bit of a reputation to say, well, you have this one C2S cloud, but you've always had that multi-cloud, the hybrid cloud approach, correct?
Correct.
And why is that important to the intelligence community beyond the obvious factors of the security side and the sensitivity of data?
So as I said before, C2S, the Amazon cloud offering to the intelligence community at the top secret, at the unclassified level, is providing something that looks very similar to Amazon Web Services on the internet, right? So it's a basket of capabilities, virtual capabilities and software services that we can use to assemble a variety of things. The community, as Doug was saying, has been experimenting with how can we leverage that given the way it's been instantiated and given the cost structure that we have. So we've always been playing with that. All of the agencies in the intelligence community have always had a large number of on-premise capabilities, that government-owned capabilities. We're experimenting with what we can move back and forth. And then, as I said, the ICgov Cloud is really sort of a different beast entirely. It's a data fusion environment, a big mission system. So from our point of view, there was never the possibility of exclusively using one of those. So in addition to providing the ICgov Cloud to the intelligence community, we're aggressively using C2S services to do complementary things, business systems, training systems, things that wrap around that core of the ICgov Cloud. And all of us are looking at that sort of cost-benefit trade-off. And there's some fairly complex considerations, particularly for systems that have very complex interactions that are very data intensive. Where the compute is really matters. Where the data is stored really matters. The pricing structures really matter if you're doing very data intensive sorts of activities. Per transaction fees just don't really make a lot of sense. So there are a lot of considerations that are going into this, but even internally, we've always had a bit of a mixed economy. It's not a single system, it's a variety of different types of systems that are optimized for different purposes. And I think going forward, that's really what we're all looking at is, what are we trying to do and what's the best tool for that job? And as we look at the potential for multiple commercial cloud services moving forward, because the intelligence community is now looking at a follow-on to C2S, and CIA has the lead for that procurement activity. There's the possibility of awards to multiple cloud vendors, and again, it's going to be the same thing. What are we trying to do? What's the best tool for the job? Is it a commercial service? Is it something on-premise? Is it a shared government-controlled service? We're looking at all those.
One of the things about the multi-cloud, and maybe David, you can jump in on this as well, is there's a balancing act that every agency, that every organization has to achieve. And I think, as Greg was saying, what's the right tool? Is that conversation coming up as you talk to government customers? Do they talk about, the way Greg put it so I think eloquently, what are we trying to do? What's the trade-off that we're looking at? Is that part of the discussion these days?
Yeah, I think it's a big part of the discussion, and I think without being an electrical engineering understanding, it's probably as deep as the conversation as some others can go. We're seeing that the IT infrastructure, or the classic telecom infrastructure, and the cloud infrastructure are somewhat merging, where the agencies are growingly, increasingly concerned or interested in looking at both architectures. And I'm not saying they're collapsing, but we're definitely seeing where the conversation is and the dialogue is about where their classic IT infrastructure is and resides, and where their cloud infrastructure resides, and how they can maximize the potential for both those architectures is a big part of the driver.
And I think that the point you're making here about telecom and cloud infrastructure merging, it's so much is voice over IP, so much is now in the cloud anyways. I could see how that becomes, the discussions are growing. Greg, jump in.
Yeah. So totally agree with that point. And in fact, some of the key considerations in terms of what makes sense to put in which of these services have to do with exactly how our networks are laid down, what latency is involved, right? If you're talking about a time-sensitive processing stream or systems that have very complex interactions, at some point the speed of light actually matters, right? Because the distance means drag. And if you talk about multiple round trips, that really can add up to something significant if you're trying to do something that is really, really time sensitive, right? So totally agree, the network laydown, the telecommunications laydown really does matter. And in the case of the intelligence community for classified services, we don't have the entire internet available. We have the classified telecommunications infrastructure the U.S. government has put in place that's protected by high-grade cryptography, high-grade encryption systems, that's has its own unique features in terms of what bandwidth is available to what locations, et cetera. So that's a lot of what we're working our way through.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Greg said. At that network layer, we've had to do a lot of work in the community to establish architectures where our systems can actually talk to one another, right? So there's a lot of groundwork, foundational work that we had to do to set the stage for our transition to cloud services, and also to determine what we're going to maintain ourselves.
All right, let's take a quick break. We can continue our conversation. We can jump into that security topic as well. You're listening to the panel, A Secure Multi-Cloud Approach in Government, sponsored by Equinix Government Solutions on Federal News Network.